We're hot.
There we go.
All right, Sheva, it's all yours.
Wonderful. So hi, everyone. I'm Sheva Rose on Facebook. I'm known in the SCA as Viscountess Sefa Hrafnsdottir. And today we are going to be doing woodblock textile stamping for beginners. I'm going to ask that everyone puts their microphone on mute because I can hear everything on your guys' side. And I have not a lot of important stuff to say, but I have cool stuff to say. So what we're going to start with is basically a brief history of the woodblock stamping and how to up your garb game with instant gratification. A lot of times you can spend hours making a dress. I can teach you how to literally up your garb game in 10 minutes. 10 minutes is all it takes, and it takes it from not necessarily zero, but it definitely takes it all the way up to hero. So we're going to go over some general basics today. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have someone pick a couple stamps and we're going to stamp. If you have supplies at home, stamp along with me. If you have questions as we go, definitely type those in the chat so that way Mariette can read them out to me, or unmute yourself. If you're like, whoa, hold on. I need to know a thing. Just let me know. So if you have the handout, I'm just basically going to be reading it and sort of elaborating as I go. If you don't have access to the handout, which it should be in the chat right now, that's okay. Because like I said, I'm just going to be reading it out loud. So what is a woodblock stamp and where did it come from? A woodblock stamp is a printing technique used for printing patterns, images, or text. The woodblock is prepared as a relief matrix. A relief matrix basically means there's a negative area and a positive area. Let's see if I can get a closer picture. So this right here, you can see a negative area, which is here, and a positive surface area right there. That means this is what's going to be transferred. This area down here is not. This way, the stamp image that is stamped shows on whatever you're printing on. The image itself is mirrored from the stamp, which is then, put onto the fabric. However, when this was done with text, it was a bit trickier because you literally had to put everything backwards for it to be correct way on whatever you're stamping. So thankfully here, we're only dealing with an image. Let's see. The technique of woodblock stamping was used widely throughout Egypt, Asia, and later in Europe. It was used as a method of printing on cloth, and the earliest surviving examples are from China and date back to before 220 AD. These accent pieces are printed on silk, and they date all the way back from the Han Dynasty. On them are depictions of flowers in 3 different colors. The earliest Egyptian printed cloth dates from the 4th century. However, because of the way that Egypt and the heat preserves their examples, it could have been from even earlier. It's not clear if the Egyptian printing of cloth was learned in China or elsewhere, or if it was developed separately. The technique of printing onto cloth did not become common in Europe until the 13th century, so between 1200 and 1299. Let's see. What was woodblock stamping used for? And what can we use it for in the SCA? Such a diverse way of arting. Woodblock printing on textiles is essentially the process of printing patterns on linen, cotton, or silk by means of using carved wooden blocks. It's the earliest, simplest, and slowest of all methods of textile printing, but is the most instantly gratifying, in my opinion. Like, it just happens, and boom, there it is. It's not hours of embroidery. It's not hours of sewing. It's literally dabbing some paint on a block, stamping some fabric, and whoo, there you go. Up your garb game. It is, however, a slow process. And that's only when you're trying to necessarily do a whole bunch of fabric. You're trying to 5 yards or 7 yards of silk that someone won from an auction, and all of a sudden I have to stamp it all. Then it goes kind of slower. However, it is capable of yielding a highly artistic result, which if you're painting by freehand, may not necessarily be achievable. For example, I can barely paint my arms. I'm lucky if I can draw a stick figure, but let alone a beast, such as this guy right here, doing that freehand. I can stamp it. I can't draw it. So block printing has been used historically and currently for decorative purposes such as fabrics and wallpaper. Even today, in areas of India, the art of woodblock stamping remains in use in making cloth, and you can generally find it in like artisanal stores, or if you go down one of the trade markets, they'll generally be out there stamping away, and they'll send it to you, sell it to you for an outrageous price, but they'll sell it to you, and they just did it. So while woodblock stamping started out as a way to decorate fabric, it evolved into engraving and printed woodcut, which eventually led to becoming an important factor in producing like playing cards, literature, and popular religious works. In the SCA, we use it now to decorate our fabric in the same way that they did in history. However, we have a little bit more freedom in our materials. You can stamp on silk, wool, linen, or almost any other material you can get to cooperate the type of paints you use. I use several different types of paints. We'll go over them. Trust me, it all depends. We also have a bit more freedom on how to use our stamped fabric based on the non-existent of complete extant examples. You can use it for a tablecloth, napkins, a bag, a neck placard, trim, an entire garment. And you can also get the stamps themselves in different materials. You can get them made from linoleum, harder wood, soft wood, even plywood. There are even machines that can create the stamps for you if you want a certain pattern or design instead of the extant stamp images. Some of the stamps I have are literally pieces of artwork that we had a friend create, whereas other stamps I have, they're based off of historical pieces. So in my class, and not necessarily anyone else's, there's all sorts of different materials you need. You definitely need paint. I use Tulip soft fabric paints. I use screen printing ink, and the screen printing ink you can actually make into several different types of paint. You can leave it thicker, which creates different texture, or you can water it down, which again creates a different texture. And it also all depends on the fabric you're using. If you're stamping on silk, the thicker you leave this, the more texture is going to be showing up on your silk. Whereas if you thin it out and still put it on the silk, it's going to do different things. And I'll walk you through that also. You also need wood block stamps for the block printing. There's several different ways you can get these. You can find, cheap ones on Amazon. You can go on to Etsy, and there are several different vendors. You just, put in woodblock stamps. There are several different vendors that'll pop up. They sell anywhere from, like Conan the Barbarian, all the way to actual, extant pieces like the Skein Beast or the 10th century Chernigov stamp. There's all sorts of different pieces on Etsy that you can go on and find and buy. Or you can find a friend with one of these machines, offer to throw money at them, and get your own stamp made. Or you can be extra and make your own. So like I said, there's linoleum that's used, so you can carve your own linoleum. You can carve your own wood. If you're going to use your own wood, I highly suggest using a softer wood. That way your chisel can work. Just please make sure you wear the protective gear to do it. There's also materials that you need to do the stamping on. This can be silk, linen, wool, a pre-made garment, cotton, whatever fabric you can get your hands on. You can 99% stamp it. There is one caveat. If you have a super pilly fabric, like fleece or a really pilly wool, your results aren't going to come out they're not going to come out as well. And that's just because they are what they are. They're a pilly fabric, so everything's going to move and shift around. But barring that, almost any fabric is stampable. You'll need a sponge applicator to blot onto your stamp. These you can buy at Joann's, Michael's, Amazon. They look like this. Little brown bottom, little wood dowel thing, and you just sort of kind of blot, 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 blot. Now, there is more than one way to apply paint to your stamp. This is my favorite way. It's the way that I found that most evenly distributes the paint on the stamp. Other people will literally cut up pieces of sponge and use that to put the paint on the stamp. Other people will use a brayer, which basically looks, let's see if I brought my brayer. I think I did. Oh yeah, I did. So other people will use a brayer. Now, the brayer, it does great for, solid paint jobs. But when you're looking at something with texture and you're using the brayer, it doesn't apply evenly all the time. And this is just my experience. You might have a better method, and by all means, use what works best for you. My preference, however, is the sponge applicators. Another piece of material you're going to need is a sturdy piece of foam. So you can get a yoga mat, or you can get these. These are foam tiles that you find in a lot of daycare centers, restaurants. They're solid, so when you step on them, that gives you a little bit of give. These are perfect for stamping on the back side. You don't want the texture side. The texture side is going to mess up your stamp. The smooth side is going to be perfect for everything that you need because it still gives you that give, and it's a nice smooth surface for your material. So that's pretty much all that you need to get started. And you probably have most of these materials in your house, except for the stamp, which if you have a stamp, we're going to move into that next. So if everyone's set up with their stamps, we can get going. But just one last note is I love making garb sometimes. Even more so, I love instant gratification. It makes me feel accomplished in the art that I'm doing. It makes me want to art more. My husband always tells me a successful completion of an art project inspires you to make more. And that is so true. So when you find yourself procrastinating, pick up your stamp and stamp some trim. Stamp some fabric to make something, stamp some scrap fabric and donate it to largesse. Get your instant gratification and have some fun with what you stamp. So I'm going to show you a couple examples of what I've stamped. And then from there, we're going to move into the actual stamping of things. So this right here is silk that I stamped with the Chernigoff stamp. So this big circle, I essentially I stamped into a row, and I cut each of the strips a portion of the circle, and I made that. Now you can use this on an apron dress. You can use it as trim around your sleeves. You can use it as trim on the bottom. You can put it on a panel right here across the top. You can put it around your whole apron right here. This is just the Chernigoff stamp. You can use stamps in almost any century, almost any persona. It just depends on what you want. Let's see, another example. I have more. I like examples. So this is a Hedeby bag I made, and I don't know if it's coming through. Oh, there it is. So this is a wool Hedeby bag that I made, and I stamped on it. And as you can see, this side looks great, but the other side was too pilly, so you can't see it as well. So it's really important when you're stamping fabric, you recognize the fabric that you're stamping. That way you don't get a really weird backside of your bag. Other than wool, you can also stamp silk. And in this case, I stamped a silk placard for my Slavic dress. So that's what this is right here. I cut strips of the same fabric to where I just had half circles. And I was able to do the sleeves on mine. And, you know, just little bits are all you need. I mean, you can do all over garments. There's nothing wrong with that. I just haven't done it. Another thing you could do is you could do the bottom hems of a garment. You know, this is my husband's tunic that matches mine. I did his bottom in this, but then I also did his collar. And it's just little things. I did not stamp this part. I could have, but I did not. But I did this part right here was stamped also. So I essentially just had a width of fabric. I stamped it all. And then I cut my strips that I wanted specifically to make this garb. This dress, which I'm not going to take down or else everything's going to fall off the top of my fridge. Sorry. But you've probably seen me wear this plenty. This is the bottom hem of an underdress that I stamped. I'm going to try and get it. I'm going to try and get it just because it's going to look good. And while I did the neck placard, which you can't really see, but it is stamped, I promise. When you see the under part, you see the stamps just basically just peek through. And it's just extra little bits that make your garments pop. I mean, if you want your whole garment, like I said, stamped, cool. But I like little pizzazz here and there. It's like showing a little bit of skin. That's really what it is. Leave something to the imagination. All right. So we're going to get set up to stamp. While I'm getting set up to stamp, are there any questions so far? No? None? Okay. Beautiful.
Nothing has come up via text yet, Sheva.
Yay! Okay. So I have a bunch of scraps to block stamp on. And I plan on donating a couple to largesse. So I know we have a Queen Bee in here. Queen Bee, what stamp am I using for largesse, yo? Where is she?
Your Majesty, I think she's talking to you. Oh.
Oh. All right. Heather, pick me a stamp.
Ooh, the Mongolian one.
You want the Mongolian one?
Yes.
Mongolian.
How come you talk to me the only time I run out of the room?
All right. And just for sake of me not having to mix my colors, because if I didn't say it already before, screen printing ink is a pain in the neck. You literally have to water it down to use it almost at all. You can use it straight out of the jar, but like I said, it's really textured and it's really thick. And the thicker your paint, the less it doesn't want to leave the stamp onto your fabric. So you get choice of colors, Heather. White, blue, or gold? Or do you want to know your fabric choice first?
I mean, give me the fabric choice first.
All right. I have a bunch of scrap linen. So you have a choice of black, green, blue, or a wild cherry red.
Blue, please.
All right. And it's just a scrap, but this one scrap, just so you know, that is enough for a neck placard. That is enough for probably 2 yards of trim if cut right. It's enough for 2 wrists, maybe even 4, depending again how you cut it. So while it's a little piece of fabric, I'd say it's probably maybe 14, just rough guesstimate, 14 by 15 piece of fabric that you can just make into all sorts of cool things. All right. Now, blue fabric. You can still choose the blue paint, because let me tell you how cool it is to stamp on something its own color. The gold on gold is gorgeous. I haven't tried blue on blue, but these are the 3 that you get a choice of right now. White, blue,
Gold, please.
Gold. That's right. I almost cussed. I stopped myself. So there's a bunch of different ways to prepare your fabric. Ironing, always a good idea. Some people tape their fabric down. I'm not that extra. I do not do that. Some people measure each little area that they do, and then they make sure to line it up perfectly in that square. I am not that person.
Sheva, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yes.
I'm assuming the fabric should be pre-washed, yes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Just like with any crafting project that you're getting ready to do with a fabric that naturally shrinks, please pre-wash it. The only thing that I will say sometimes you do not have to do is silk. And that's because when you block stamp on silk, you are generally not going to be washing it and drying it the same way you do your linen underdress over and over and over. So there are times where I do not pre-wash my silk. I'll do like a light shrink where I'll put the silk itself into some warm water and just sort of agitate it a little bit and then iron it dry. But that's the only time it sees water on purpose. Any other time, it's a big no-no. This is a new block stamp. One of the things I do with my block stamps that are, I guess, symmetrical for the, lack of a better term, is I figure out which side I want to be my up. Once I figure out which side I want to be my up, I'll mark the back and say, this way is up. Let's see. Like this. So this is one of my symmetrical stamps. And there's a little marking up here that says up. This is another one. I have a marking up here, which to me says up. Maybe not everyone. And that's because when I'm stamping, I want it to be the same going the whole way, not doing this topsy-turvy, drive me crazy because it's not a symmetrical pattern. So that's going to be the first thing I do with my new stamp, is figure out how it's up. So in order to do that, I find one of the points. And just because I don't have a Sharpie right here, I'll use some chalk. And I'll just sort of kind of draw a line on the side of the stamp and come to the back of the stamp and draw an arrow. I know which side is up now. Now I can paint. So I have my fabric. It was ironed until I sat on it, but it's okay. Do as I say, not as I do. Make sure that there's nothing on your board. Something to also be aware of before we get started. Your paint will transfer through your fabric. So unless you have several of these, which I do, be prepared to let your fabric dry in between your runs. So like this, I can do in one run because this fits within my one block. But if you're doing 8 yards, you're going to only be able to do however many of your foam mats you have before you let it dry to move your fabric up, because fabric, the paint goes through your fabric. You don't want that paint going anywhere else except for this mat. You also don't want the paint that's on this mat to go on the back of your next piece of fabric. It's horrible. It's sad. Ask me how I know. Okay, moving on. So I have my stamp marked, going up. I have my favorite dauber. It's my favorite one. It's so old. I have some of my paint in my little paint tray. This tulip paint, you do not need to water down. You can a little bit if you want to, but this is not necessary. This is just regular fabric paint. Whereas the screen printing ink, you need to water it down a little bit because it's not meant to go on a stamp and onto fabric the way that we're using it. Yes, it's meant for fabric, but not going on it the way that we're doing it. So you have your paint on your dauber, you have your stamp, and you're just going to kind of start in the middle. And you know how Bob Ross does happy little trees? You're making happy little trees all over your stamp. And you're just going to go around, make sure you're not overdoing the paint, but you definitely don't want to underdo it. Because if you underdo it, it transfers as being underdone. And then you're sad. Because unless you're really good at going back and putting your very intricate stamp back over the exact same spot, it's not going to work. There are ways to fix it. You can use fine tip paintbrush and go back over and sort of connect the dots where you think they should go. And I mean, if you miss a little bit, it is not the end of the world. We are there. Yes, there are perfectionists. I am not one of them. So we have plenty of paint on here. I'm going to do a little bit more just for extra because it's a brand new stamp. Brand new stamps. For some reason, my first stamp with a brand new stamp is always not the best. It drives me crazy. And I say I'm not a perfectionist, but I am to that point. Like, I like to think I'm good at what I do. So I've done lots of little happy little trees. I have ink pretty much all over my stamp. I'm going to pick an area, top left, and I'm sort of going to just plop it down. You are not done yet. I keep telling people, do the Heimlich maneuver. No, don't do the Heimlich. Do CPR. So you're going to do 1, 2, 3. You're just sort of, without letting weight off, you're just sort of going to push around the edges of the stamp. It's really important that you have leverage, which is why I'm literally kneeling on a chair right now because my kitchen table like goes up to my boobs. So you push, you push, you push, you push, push. Oh, I forgot to double check my arrow. My arrow is pointing up, just so you know. And then one hand you're going to put on your fabric, the other hand on your stamp, and you're going to pull away from your other hand. So left-hander, right-hander, doesn't matter. And you're going to pull up and away. Oh, that looks beautiful. I love it. And you have a stamp. I can't tell if you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Oh, yay, yay, thanks. So, let's see if I can get it closer. And so there, you have a beautiful Mongolian stamp.
Sheva, while you're repositioning yourself, we had a question in chat. Can you stamp multiple colors with one stamp?
Ha! That is an excellent question. And I actually researched that today. So yes, you can. Let's say you want, like, are we talking like within one stamp or like a pattern?
Within one stamp.
Within one stamp. So, yes, you can. Historically, what they would do is they would literally have a puzzle. Imagine a puzzle. And these puzzle pieces, you'd you'd ink on and put it down. You'd put another piece on the next puzzle, put it down, put some more on a different color and put it down. And then you'd push all those together. So yes, you can. I believe Honig did hers that way. when she had her Queen's Favors. I know Margarita had some of hers done, but hers were done sort of like in a different way. Like hers were specifically with this M and then with this daisy. And we had markings on the back of, you know, you do this and then you sort of slide this on top of that stamp and put it there. So there was a lot of measuring that went on. When we're talking about just this stamp, yes, again, you can. It depends how technical you want to get. Like I have these little blotters right here, literally the size of my pinky, that if you wanted to, you could probably at least, you know, draw your line this way, get another one with a different color and draw it that way. And you could have half and half, or, you know, do a quarter. It just takes a lot of these, a lot of patience, but then it takes a lot of speed because you don't want your other colors to dry out while you're going around putting other colors on the same stamp. It's a big thing. You don't want it to happen. So that's a good question. I actually had to research that one before I made my thing, but I didn't put it in my beginner's handout because I'm like, oh, this is just going to be for beginners. I have smart people in my class. This makes me so happy. I'm not saying no one else is smart, but I like smart people that ask hard questions. I like it even better when I have the answers. Who else is stamping with me? Is anyone stamping with me? Because I have a bunch of happy trees happening. I want to hear everyone else singing happy trees. All right. So I have my arrow up. I'm going to go on to the next one. Now, this is where some people, like I said, they draw a grid on their fabric. I don't. It's because it's just how I roll. And I still feel that my stamping comes out pretty. Granted, if there was like, if I was trying to do a pattern using more than one stamp, or I was doing a whole big garment, I'd probably grid it out just so that way there's a proper distance. But in this case, because of what we're going to be doing with this fabric, I'm probably not going to do that because I know it's going to become sleeves or trim or something else that you can't tell with your eyeball, not even from a foot away, that there's like a millimeter off. So,
Sheva, you do have one person stamping along with you. Karen is stamping along with you.
yay, Karen! That makes me happy. Let's see. I feel like everyone should have a drink. Does everyone have a drink? Everyone should unmute themselves. I'm done teaching. Now we're just talking.
I have this lovely glass of water here. There we go.
I have water too. Boring.
Why are you guys drinking water? I mean,
I
it's
have
cool.
Water is very necessary. Hydration. Stay hydrated, my friends.
I
No
like
hydration.
hydration.
But I'm drinking wine.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten to the wine part.
Still drinking the same ginger ale and whiskey.
Oh, that's turning out so good.
So do people have any questions that they want to ask Sheva about best practices or things to consider while you're stamping stuff?
I was going to ask you about wool, but you already answered the question, so there you go. And now I can't use this piece of fabric I wanted.
That's not true. That's not true.
It's very pilly.
Pilly.
It's really pilly. Hold on.
Is it a heavyweight wool or a medium?
It's a heavyweight. It's almost like a felted wool. So
Okay.
I don't know. I might try it in a corner.
You know, it's do a test. Do a test on the corner.
Yep.
It's not gonna hurt it.
I'll go get my octopus stamp, the little tiny one, and I'll try it in the corner.
Make sure that you have so one thing I have learned about more difficult to stamp fabric is the broader your stamp pattern. Like, give me a second. Let me finish this one. The broader your stamp fabric on pillier material, the better the stamp is.
Okay.
So if you recognize on my black Hedeby bag, it's the same stamp on both sides. But that last side, I was literally doing so much CPR, like my entire body weight and then some was going on it just to make it come through.
Would
But
a
if you were
sticker
to have like,
affect that any?
if you were to have like this one,
Mm-hmm.
where
Which
it
I
has
did.
a lot of surface area, and put that on your tulle or fabric, it's going to cover more, so the pattern is actually going to come out better.
Oh, okay.
It's just surface area ideas. You know, and it's all sorts, it's fun. Heather, I really like the stamp on this fabric. It's pretty.
Yeah. I have good taste. We have 2 more questions from chat. So we have one question about how do we set our stamped fabric? Is there anything after we stamp that we need to do to make sure it stays?
That's another really good question. It totally depends on the paint you use. This type of paint right here, the tulip paint, you literally leave it for 3 days and you're done. You don't have to do anything with it. Whereas the Jacquard screen printing ink, you have to let it dry and then iron set it from the back side of the material with a towel on the other side. So it all depends on the ink, the stamp, the ink you use. There's always directions generally on the back that tells you how to heat set it or to set it if it's necessary.
Okay, we had another question about stamping on already made garb.
Ooh, that's fun. So this dress, this underdress right here, was already made when we stamped it because I needed the garment to be made and fitted because it's done at the bottom of the gown. So here's the top, right? And then you go all the way down and there's the bottom. Now you can't stamp the bottom until it's put together. So the way that you stamp the bottom of a garment is you measure your stamp and then you measure around your bottom hem. And if you're lucky, you can do solid stamping the whole way through. If not, there's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can use math again and figure out how much exact spacing you need between each stamp to make it to where it's even all the way around. Or you can just not give a flying fig and stamp, and then pick one area where it's just half a stamp. I like the first option personally, just because I like completion. I like full stamps.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We also had a question about the benefits of one ink over the other. You've talked about how the screen printing ink is a little bit harder to use, but is there a benefit to using that over using the fabric paint?
So yes and no. It depends on the texture that you want to come out. I'm going to use this trim again for an example. So I'm going to come around and I'm going to show you the differences. So this is screen printing ink done on a red silk taffeta. Okay. If you could feel it through the thing, I'd say you can feel texture. You can see more of like if you were to do this, you know how you can see like sheets of paper. You can see like there's a sheet of paper. You can see the texture raised. You can feel the texture. This is the tulip. There we go. This is the tulip ink done on a Dupioni silk. And again, there's a texture, but it blends in with the fabric. It looks like it's an actual piece of the fabric. So it really depends on what you're wanting to do with your garb and what you want it to do. Like, do you want it to pop? Do you want it to be subtle? And when you're doing contrasting colors, like the gold on the blue, you know, it can go either way. If you're doing a blue on the blue, you can make it have texture and it's like amazing to see how deep the fabric and the colors go and meld together, and all of a sudden they're like two totally different things. It's all art. It depends on what you want. What's your mood? What are you doing with it? I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of rambled. Sorry.
Yes, it did.
Yay! Huzzah.
Are there any other questions out there?
When this is all over, we're going to have a stamping party, right? That's my question.
Yes, please.
Hey, Fallon.
Absolutely.
Yes, please. More stamping.
I like stamping.
I know you do.
It's my favorite. You want to know what my favorite dish is to use for paints?
What?
You'll laugh. Cat dishes for like cat food. Because they're slick and slidey, and they're designed to like not hold on to things. Like, I don't know who has cats, and I don't do wet cat food anymore. He's not a kitten. But getting wet cat food out of a bowl any other than his actual bowl was hell. But like a cat food dish, perfect.
Huh.
The best.
Interesting.
So I'm just going to stay here and finish stamping this. Get a good like 3.5 rows out of this, Heather.
Nice. Outstanding.
She'll pick it up later.
I might end up mailing it along with some masks I made.
Awesome.
All right. So if no one has any other questions for Sheva, do you have anything else you want to say before we stop recording?
I do. I just want to once again thank the Minister and Deputy Minister of Arts and Sciences for hosting these virtual online classes. Without them, I think I'd be going crazy, as well as some other people, especially with social distancing being what it is. And thank you guys all for attending my class. I really appreciate it.
Yay.
Yay, thank you.
Thank you, Sheva.
Thank you, Sheva.
Yes.